Vegas police say Stephen Paddock intentionally aimed his gunfire at the emergency vehicles as they were moving in to save the lives of people who were at that concert that night. Today, Sheriff Lombardo took to the podium in what turned out to be a very emotional briefing as he defended his police force's response.
I still stand by the time of 21:59, 9:59. It wasn't inaccurate when I provided it to you. The circumstances associated with it is inaccurate. Through investigation, we have determined that Mr. Campos had encountered the barricaded door adjacent to the suspect's door at approximately 21:59. In his attempt to gain entry to the 32nd floor, he required him to ascend to another level and eventually make access to the 32nd floor. When you culminate that timeline associated from the initial 21:59 to the 22:05 timeline that we are still stand by as the initial volley of fire, Mr. Campos received his wounds in close proximity to 22:05. There is no conspiracy between the FBI, between LVMPD, and the MGM. Nobody is attempting to hide anything.
Quite an afternoon. Here now, retired Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Lieutenant and host of Blue Lives Radio, Randy Sutton. Randy, good evening to you. Good to have you with us tonight.
Thanks, Martha. Good to be here.
You know, I watched Sheriff Lombardo. We watched him throughout the course of this entire tragedy and the massacre that happened in Las Vegas. It is so clear today that he feels so deeply offended by the suggestion that there was any delay on the part of the Las Vegas Police Department. What did you take away from that news conference this afternoon?
Well, a couple different things. One is that on the timeline that was so critical, this 6 minutes that we were talking about, he actually did contradict himself. The original report was that Mr. Campos took fire at 21:59, 9:59, and then there was a 6-minute delay between that time and the firing on the mass shooting. So, in essence, what the sheriff said today was that 9:59 wasn't when he was shot, but when he first encountered because Paddock had blockaded a door that led to the 32nd floor. That radio communication was what he was referring to. It's not when he was shot. When he got up to the 32nd floor, that's when he was shot, and then apparently that's when the mass shooting took place. So, in essence, the MGM's timeline is the accurate one. The 21:59, the 9:59 is not accurate. That's from a radio. That's when he radioed that he had encountered the barricaded door. But here's something that wasn't mentioned, Martha, and this is something that should have been mentioned, that there was a maintenance worker who also reported that there was a man with a rifle firing shots. That hasn't been addressed. What time was that? That's really critical information, and it wasn't addressed.
Yeah, you're right. And, you know, you would make the assumption, but of course, assuming anything is very tricky in these circumstances, but that when he came out of the door and started firing at Jesus Campos, that was when this other worker heard the gunfire, because you can hear Campos and the maintenance worker as he's telling him to get down. To move out of the way. So it also moves up the timeline in terms of the shooting coming out into the hallway, and then it seems like 40 seconds later, which is the timeline that MGM put out, he just turned around and started firing out those windows. But it may have triggered him to move more quickly in the shooting of the concert than he had originally planned. No?
It's very possible. We don't know what he originally planned as far as, he clearly had to be done within a very short proximity because it was the last act of the show.
Yeah.
So that's
well, there was some speculation by Mark Furman that he might have wanted to wait until the lights came up and the show was over, which is what we saw happen in Manchester. And it's possible that was what he wanted. I do want to get your thoughts on the fuel tanks, because that was the other thing that he confirmed this afternoon, that the fuel tanks at McCarran Airport were intentionally fired upon. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and that's very disturbing, of course. This guy wanted to commit as much mayhem and murder as he possibly could. And I guess he figured out after he fired a couple rounds at the tanks and they didn't explode that was a waste of time, which in essence it was because of the design of those tanks. But one thing I really want to impart here is what the sheriff said about the bravery of the Metro law enforcement officers. It was exceedingly brave. What those officers encountered was something unprecedented in law enforcement history. And I know personally from some of my friends who were there and partook in this incredible tragedy, that this was going to have a tremendous, long-lasting effect, and those men and women who responded did so with great professionalism and great bravery.
And that was very emotional, and we're going to play that a little bit later in the program tonight. Randy Sutton, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Martha.